Hey folks. So my name is Abhi. With me is Brendan. Both of us are going to talk about how do we make policy work for people doing the work. So I have one simple question for you is do you do you believe in miracles? And when I say miracles, I don't mean like, the Blue Jays winning the World Series because that's like a divine miracle. I mean a miracle as in something that's so profoundly different from the norm that it registers as a singularly positive experience in your life, right? Something that's out of the norm, out of the ordinary, that you'll remember for a long time. Like a perfect apology is a miracle, and a great gift could be a miracle. I was telling someone the other day, my wife got me this fidget spinner, and I didn't know I needed one until I had one. A good gift is a miracle. Contractors, decarbonization contractors in Canada, are expected to perform three miracles every single day. First thing is a technical miracle. So the norm is that a vast majority of households will look for an HVAC replacement when their heating system or cooling system abruptly breaks, usually during the two warmest or the coldest weeks of the year, or during the first two coldest or the warmest weeks of the year. The what decarbonization contractors and home renovators are expected to do is to enter into, Allison, just really quickly, I did the preamble and everything, so I got your back. What the decarbonization contractors are expected to do is to pull a miracle where treating house as a complex system of system to design bespoke custom projects for each single home and sequence retrofits. It's not just about replacing one heating system with another one, but doing decarbonization at scale and properly, they have to sequence insulation upgrades, air sealing upgrades, and HVAC system replacement over time. And these projects are custom, and each home is different. Two homes in the same neighborhood might be different. And especially with new HVAC system with heat pumps and stuff like that, they may be a little bit more sensitive to install quality than the big lumbering machines that we've had to heat and cool our homes in the past. Second thing is a social miracle. So the norm is that most homeowners are looking for a transactional one-time relationship with their home renovators or contractors. But in order to make decarbonization a reality, contractors have to somehow earn the trust of homeowners to deviate from the norm of treating this as a single transaction, like buying a new, it's like homeowners treat this like you're buying a new appliance, like a refrigerator or a dishwasher. They have to turn this into something that's more of a consultative relationship, that's more long-term. And it's a little bit more collaborative rather than the homeowner and the contractor entering into this kind of transactional combative race to the bottom on competing just on price alone and not on the value that's been generated through this relationship. And finally, is the financial miracle because of the consequence of what I just outlined, the technical and the social. The most residential HVAC and home renovation projects are seasonal feast and famine cycles. During the coldest and the warmest weeks of the year is when vast majority of business happens, and somehow contractors have to hold together a business, hold employees, attract, retain, and retrain skilled employees, and run a successful business in against the backdrop of these feast and famine cycles of market demand. Stop and start programs, a vast majority of programs, and as we've seen with the later Greener Homes federal program, abruptly start and end. And so when programs start, it creates a sugar rush where you have to retool your existing business practices to meet the terms of that funding arrangement. And then when that funding abruptly stops, as they indeed do almost every single time, then you enter into a sugar crash, essentially. And these stop-start programs make it really hard to run a successful business and to hold on to your skilled employees. And recently in Canada and in the US, we've seen increasingly a lot of small HVAC businesses being bought out, consolidated, largely in part because some of these businesses do not have a succession plan on how do you transition this business, selling it to your family or to your employees. There isn't a lot of headway made in those things. And so what happens is that, large consolidation firms backed by private equity are buying out small and medium-sized mom and pop, second, third generation HVAC companies and consolidating them into one, which may not necessarily seem like so much of a bad thing, but the focus of short-term, gains on investments over long-term growth and of a business and building a legacy can be at odds with our goal if you're thinking about, decarbonization. Now, these factors together, what this is doing is in the marketplace, in the kitchen table conversation between the homeowner and the contractor, which is where most purchasing decisions happen, the value proposition of doing a retrofit on your home and the value proposition of buying a new heat pump or buying a new HVAC system is shrunk down to just a transactional, one-time competition on the upfront cost and price of things, not on the value that can be unlocked, not on the value on the contractor side about running a successful business, improving productivity, having a stable seasonal demand, or on the homeowner side about having a home that meets your comfort needs, meeting your own personal climate goals, or a home that meets your health and durability, saving on bills. So all of this value is really when as a consequence of these three challenges that I've outlined, the business models are shrunk down to just competing or racing to the bottom, competing on price and not on unlocking value for either side of this kitchen table. And this is a problem. And this is a problem not just for climate, but it's also an economic policy problem, because what this is leading to, this kind of boom and bust cycle, is leading to is just shallow, piecemeal, one-off retrofits, not treating homes as a whole home, taking a whole home approach and building in, sequencing in retrofits over the long time so that we are doing deep retrofits in ways that are aligned with our decarbonization pathways. I did the rough back of the envelope math in the time that it took me to give this presentation. We've around Canada, we've installed about 8, energy intensive and perhaps fossil fuel based heating systems. So roughly by my back of the envelope math, and someone peer reviewed this for me, about once per minute, we are locking in a furnace or a inefficient heating or cooling system in a home, and that will stay in place until for lifetime of that piece of equipment, which is about 15 or 20 years. And finally, what this is leading to is that consumer confidence in not just these technologies like heat pumps and in the industry of home retrofits and HVAC contractors is low due to these cycles, and it slows market adoption and it hurts our long-term ability to meet our climate goals. And this is also an economic policy problem because the road to building stable, intergenerational wealth creation and stable middle-class jobs is increasingly narrow in Canada, particularly for people who choose, for a combination of reasons, not to go to post-secondary school. And the pathways towards that is either through manufacturing or through resource extraction industries. And both of those industries are likely to be automated in maybe the next 10, 15 years. So the pathway towards good middle-class jobs, towards creating wealth, towards craftsmanship and excellence, and towards business ownership and leadership and being leaders in the communities, that pathway is very narrow. And home renovation services, HVAC services is one of those few pathways. And if we care about Canada with a diversity of businesses that are providing value-added services to homeowners that are willing to pay for it, we need to pay attention to these challenges that I just outlined. And I'll leave this question to you is, do you believe in miracles? Because I do. I've been accused of being an optimist, and I don't deny that accusation. And I do believe in miracles, and I do think it is possible for us to scale decarbonization. What needs to happen is that these business models, right, that are miracles today, have to become routine as an everyday thing. They have to be reliable, that contractors can reliably invest in this business model and homeowners can reliably expect a certain value from that business model. Has to be rewarding unlock value for both sides of the kitchen table, repeatable as in that these are not custom bespoke projects, but that's something that contractors can do over and over again, and it can be done by anybody, any contractor, not just a few boutique shops around the country. And so I will pass it over to Brendan to talk about how we may do so.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Yeah, so as Abby explained, there's value, I think, being left on the table both for homeowners and contractors. And as you mentioned, business models, that's the thing that a change in those business models we think could do something different. So what the heck is a business model? It's very simple. It just is explaining this is the way of doing things. Okay. And I guess inherent in that concept is that, a business doesn't automatically achieve every, profitable opportunity available to it, right? They target certain opportunities and they leave others out. And they do that for a variety of reasons. It's not a good match with their existing way of doing things. There are risks, there's uncertainties, there's lack of trust in changing things up, or there's not even time to search for new opportunities or figure out if they're real or if they're fake, right? And so another key point is that, the success of certain business models is not just about the internal workings of the business. It's also about that larger market and policy environment that they operate within. So, if you can go to the next slide, Abby, in this space, like if we look at the home retrofit kind of space, we can outline almost a spectrum of how we might conceive of different ways of doing things, different business models. And we kind of have this spectrum of going towards greater responsibility on that business themselves. So at one end, it can be, hey, like the project management, the financing, that's still largely left to the homeowner, but there's some support with navigating programs, navigating the project. At the total other end of the spectrum, you could have these energy or comfort as a service models, right? Where from the customer perspective, they've got no upfront cost. Financing, let's say, is available on the same day. The installation is fully managed, the retrofit's fully managed, and there's performance of the home is, monitored and maintained over the long term. So if we think business models are important, if you can go to the next slide, Abby, how do we change them? So there's really two ways. One is supporting businesses and changing internal processes and internal routines, finding new opportunities. But the second is changing those market environments to increase the opportunities for different business models to succeed. And I guess both are not really accomplished by, say, let's just implement a new regulation or a new subsidy program. Business model changes are really about this kind of co-evolution of internal business practices and building up trust and a new way of doing things, and then changes to that market and policy environment that supports that change. So if we go to the next slide, this is really how the thinking really behind how we design this research is. The endpoint is, how do we turn this, miracle of a really customer-friendly, deeply decarbonized, profitable home performance service into, the new way of doing things? And our understanding of how business models change, suggested it was more about getting kind of the relationships right and then getting the rules or the prices right. So if we go to the next slide, Abby, so if we think about, how do we enter into a conversation, with the people doing the work to try to get some insights. And so what we did is we first produced a discussion paper that spelled out some of these concepts about business models, how they change, why they change, thinking about also the dynamics of the sector. And then Abby and Carol, who went out and they had discussions with people on the ground in their trucks about the potential impact of different policies on their businesses. And I just think I want to emphasize was not, a survey. Like definitely there was a lot of listening involved, but I mean, I was encouraging like argumentation, right? Even like some back and forth process with one side bringing some policy insights, and another, talking about, well, this is how that would impact my businesses. This is what you need to understand about my business in terms of how that policy could work or don't work. So that got us a list of, not just policies that could be, good or bad, but also things like, hey, pitfalls in implementation. So I'm going to hand it back over to Abby to talk about some of those ideas that came out of this action research.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, I want to emphasize that too. I'm very grateful for everyone who welcomed us into their work trucks, into their workplaces, their homes and lives, so we could better understand the system that we're trying to influence. And so here are some, informed as they are by people on the ground, here are the kind of policies that if we get them right and if we get them implemented, contractors will like them. So our report goes into them in a little bit more detail, but I'm just going to bucket them and kind of categorize them in broad categories and give you an overview of each of them. So the first kind of three buckets of ideas would be transforming incentives from this sort of like stop and start programs and subsidies given to homeowners to moving some of these incentives and financing upstream. So this could be, providing incentives to equipment manufacturers or distributors so that we make every air conditioner a heat pump. We've contributed to some research on that, and that will be available on the report page. It could include giving incentives to contractors themselves for getting installations right, for meeting, a certain performance standards for install quality, certain performance standards for sizing systems right, and things like that. And the third bucket of these ideas would be on like kind of changing financing, going to more contractor-led financing, because right now navigating the landscape of these multiple stacking financing models is a challenge both for contractors and homeowners. So in the marketplace, there are a lot of private financing available through contractors, but we've outlined that there could be a role for governments to play here in empowering contractors to provide and lead and guide homeowners into getting more long-term, low payment-based financing models, so that when people make upgrades on their forever homes, they can realize the gains of it without having to front too much of the cost up front. The second bucket of ideas is around improving consumer confidence. And so these ideas would be around, examples like mandatory building labeling. Here's an example. If you walk to your neighborhood grocery store, right, and you picked up a water bottle and you turned it around, you took a look, it comes with a mandatory label, and the label will say 0 calories. Why? Because like we as a country have determined that, yes, I mean, we know water is 0 calories, maybe most of us do perhaps, but that having information empowers consumers to make choices that aligns with their values and also with, with their practices and with their preferences. The most expensive thing you could ever buy in your lifetime and in your family's lifetime at home comes with no labels at all. Utility bills and they are the single largest uncontrollable expense for most households. And prior to buying or renting a home, you have no idea how much you would expect to pay in utility bills. And furthermore, when you do a kitchen reno or a bathroom reno, there are established benchmarks for how much of that cost you can recover if you decide to choose to sell your place. There really isn't a way for capturing the value of making the investments on home retrofits. And so improving consumer awareness and consumer confidence so that they can invest clearly in the marketplace of retrofits would be another basket of policy approaches. This could also include improved data access and improving so that it's easier for contractors and homeowners to have meaningful conversations about sizing system and equipment, making that information more available to contractors. I've heard so many times from contractors where they go into people's homes, talk to them about heat pumps, and homeowners will ask them for case studies, and it makes it hard for them to have the conversation because contractors are put in an awkward situation where they have to both educate the homeowner and sell them something. And that might sound, for some homeowners, like you're being upsold, and that kind of fractures the nebulous trust building that needs to happen for this kind of long-term relationship to build. So making data and information more really available, helping homeowners navigate this journey alongside contractors will improve consumer confidence, will help more homeowners invest in contractors and businesses that are providing them the value that they're looking to unlock from their homes. And the last bucket of ideas is around supporting business innovation. And I've said this before, if you owned a restaurant and you wanted to, I don't know, buy a few chickens so you can serve your guests free range omelets, you could go to the BDC, the Business Development Corporation. You might get a business loan. You might get a business mentor. You would get like a business, a business model transformation plan. There's help available for even small businesses in other sectors. But if you're a contractor, HVAC contractor, let's say, and you're looking to add insulation and provide more value to your customers, the pathway for doing that is not immediately clear or obvious. And there are not many low risk settings in which contractors can invest and adopt these new business practices so that they can expand the services that they're able to offer to homeowners that are willing to pay them. So some of these basket of ideas are around providing mentorship and coaching, peer-to-peer mentorship. There are several examples of this in our report from the US, where you can get paired with another small business owner in another service territory that doesn't overlap with yours, so that you can open up your books and then work through better understanding how you can improve your own practices. Modernization training. The landscape of software services in home renovation industry has changed rapidly in the past 4 or 5 years, and that's creating winners and losers between those who can afford to invest in these technology system that squeezes more productivity out of your enterprise too, and then the smaller mom pop and business that may not have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So providing some business supports and training so they can adopt a more productivity enhancing services so that they can focus on providing value to their homeowners while using these tools to minimize, grunt work like writing invoices and following up on leads and stuff like that is an area of policy intervention. And then finally, business incubation accelerators so that, the men and women who run the sector can test and try new ideas, ways of doing business in a risk-free environment and grow and scale their businesses. So with all of these things, taken together, I will pass it on to Brendan to kind of bring it all together and talk about how policy can work for people who are doing work.
Okay, I'll do my best. So so that's a nice list of policies that could work. I'm going to talk again a little bit about like why this matters again, and talk a little bit about like the process. So if we go to the next slide. So I want to talk a bit about why we should think about home retrofits, home performance as like a strategic sector. And that means that we really should care about the performances of the businesses within those sector. And so first, Abby already talked about this. This is a more service-oriented sector that I think we're going to increasingly need to rely on these types of sectors for good middle-class jobs. And I don't just mean like more jobs, I mean like stable, good wage jobs. The resource sectors, the manufacturing sectors, if you look at the data, they are not providing those jobs in the way that they used to because of, globalization, automation. A second reason is that this is actually increasingly a high-tech sector, right? That could benefit from the adoption of digital technologies, the proper use of digital technologies. So just, cold climate heat pumps are communicating computers. You can air seal a home with the help of a computer and sensors. Hot water tanks can integrate with electricity grids and, to store wind energy. Thermostats, enable remote there's, measurement probes and software that can ensure heat pumps are installed properly, right? So the more adoption there is of those tools, the more productive the industry can become, the more value can be captured year round, the higher wages can be paid, the more decarbonization we could have, right? And these types of technologies, they tend to be like worker enhancing and not worker displacing. So that should be a huge economic opportunity. Third reason, it's obvious. If we care about decarbonization, contractors are either going to drive or stall those policies and those homeowner efforts. And then fourth, Abby talked about this already, there's this really kind of interesting pressure from potential buyouts from private equity that can have a big effect on what business models are followed, what kind of value is going to be captured in local economies. And what's really interesting when you walk through this list is these are like similar challenges that, strategic sectors like manufacturing and software have had for a while. And in those sectors, policymakers really care about the business models. So that is why, there's digital adoption support for small manufacturers. That's why software scale ups, there's policies to try to prevent foreign buyouts, try to help them manage that kind of pressure, right? So in other sectors, there's long-standing tailored supports. So the most well-known one is through, say, the Industrial Research Assistance Program, right? And the benefit of those kind of tailored support policies is twofold. One is it directly helps the businesses in ways that make sense to them, enhance their productivity. But the second one is that with people in those organizations constantly interacting, collecting information from businesses, they can design better policies, right? That don't unintentionally, say, create problems and can actually really truly drive like business model change. So that's the process point. And what Abby and Carol did in this research project is almost like a miniature version of that type of interaction between like kind of policy nerds and businesses that, perhaps should be a more regular thing in public policy, right? And in this aspect of public policy. So if we go back to the next slide, I'm just going to wrap up. What have we tried to say here? Well, one is Abby talked about the miracle of the like multifaceted work of home decarbonization. The dominant business models, I think, are leaving a lot of savings, a lot of value on the table. When we need to think about business model change as a decarbonization priority, but also a strategic economic policy priority. Got to recognize that doesn't just happen. It's actually like a process, and it requires, home performance. Let's think about that as a strategic sector and the implications of that. And that means thinking about a more business-oriented policy approach, which I think is quite different from the way in the energy efficiency world, usually the policies we think about are taxes, subsidies, regulatory policies. So I'll hand it back to you, Abby.
Thanks, Brandon. This is the last slide, folks. I promise I know we're a touch over time. Just a couple of things. So, in as much as, I mean, we are a policy research institute and we put out, our policy recommendations, that's the arena and that's our canvas. But yeah, some just personal reflections, having spent many years in this space, is that like if you're a homeowner and my recommendation for you is to plan for when your heat pump or your heating or cooling system, because it will inevitably fail one day. So you can support this transition by rewarding long-term value creation, voting with your wallets, and steering demand from like this kind of one-time fixes to more comprehensive long-term value creation. If you're a climate advocate, like Brendan mentioned, I think it's incumbent upon us, if you think of yourself as a climate advocate, to champion policies that are really focused on enabling policies that change and transform markets. And so there's a couple of ones off the top of our heads. Easy wins could be making building energy labeling mandatory on condition of sale or renting, having contractor-led long-term financing, and making every ACA heat pump. These are just some of the ones in there, but for me, these are top of the head. If you're a climate advocate, let's move our attention away from stop and start programs and advocate for some of these more enabling policies. And if you're a utility, a partner, a stakeholder, you run a contractor network of excellence, then let's chat about how you could be perhaps fostering these kind of low-risk environments in which contractors can try a couple of new things, change a couple of things in their business practice, and innovate through peer-to-peer led innovation, peer-to-peer capacity building, and business model transformation. That's it from both of us. Thank you for being here, and thanks for following our work. You could use this QR code. It will take you to our report page that has not just this report, but also other associated research. Now, I will jump directly to question and answers, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm just going to do them in no particular order, folks, and I apologize if I skipped over yours. It isn't my intention to do that intentionally. Okay, so the value of label for homes and home renovations. We've tried to do this in the past with HERS and eco ratings. So what happened to those, and why aren't they good enough for what we are proposing? So Brendan, would you do you mind if I bunt this to you? Because these might be before my time in Canada. So
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, we have building labels. I mean, there's a whole discussion on, you know, changing those building labels, how to make them better, perhaps using like real-time data, not kind of modeled information. But I think the key thing is not that like there are labels, which is great. The key thing is they are not like the market norm. They are not part of regular transactions. So the real policy ask in this case is that the labels be required, say when you're purchasing a home, right? That's like the big difference. On large buildings, perhaps those labels should actually be in the front of the building so you understand the energy performance of the building. So yeah, the big difference is, the labels right now are really kind of on a voluntary basis, but they should be, integrated within every transaction for everyone to understand it.
yeah, and this is a pathway that other jurisdictions have already undertaken in Europe and in the UK with energy performance certificates. And I mean, we can argue till all of us are blue in the face about whether that's, that are they, how do they capture all the value stuff, but it is a starting point. And the good thing about this kind of building enabling policy, making it mandatory, is that it makes it easier to direct policy attention to households that need it the most and provide supports for lowest income households living in the least efficient homes and directing our attention towards upgrading them and making them more livable and sustainable for many, many years to come. Just a couple of, I think I'll answer a couple of these quick. Yes, this webinar will also be shared. It'll be on our YouTube channel and we will share it through our LinkedIn. So you can go do other important things if you have to step out for a minute. A couple of questions around like verification. So, verifying performance of installed systems. How do we do it? Who does it? What is the best way of doing it? So I'll answer that. In our conversations with contractors, a lot of what comes through is that there is really no good way right now of separating the not the contractors that are doing it the way it's supposed to be done versus the ones that are not. And this isn't, again, perhaps, like because the lack of enforcement of those performance standards. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. One is that we could use, like Brendan mentioned, new software and tools and probes and things like that, and just enable begin with like contractor self-education, right? Not so that contractors can then learn through practice how they can improve what their practices are doing and how they can install systems to, manufacture prescribed standards or best practice standards. Who can provide this service and where does the funding come from? I mean, right now, in many provinces across the country have some funding or the other for, especially in the Atlantic provinces, for heat pumps and new HVAC systems. So one way of ensuring quality standards and in inspiring consumer confidence in particularly these program-led market transformation is to leverage these programs, to leverage this funding mechanism to help elevate practices of contractors through beginning with contractor education and training. And by education and training, I don't mean like send them to a course for 6 weeks at a community college. I mean on-hand skill development and peer-to-peer learning so that they can improve their practices. And then over time, we are leveraging these public dollars for public good, which is elevating market standards. Couple more questions here. This is a classic question. Great question, Drew. So is the priority convincing homeowners to ask for value? Or is it to get contractors to push for value? And I spend a lot of time thinking about this question. It's like a chicken and egg problem. Like, what comes first? Like, should we drive demand on the homeowner side, or should we like improve, the skills and abilities and stuff on the contractor side? And how does this happen? What we are learning through our research is that this is kind of like a one-step, two-step thing. And the locus of the challenge really, and the locus of opportunity really is at the homeowner and the contractor. It may not be useful to think of them as two separate entities seeking to maximize their own individual utility, because that is how you kind of race to the bottom. The key is to think of this as a business model and a business transaction where the relationship between the homeowner contractor, the line of value and accountability defines what the business model is. And if we treat that as the locus, then we can think of what kind of policy interventions will feed into this locus so that naturally homeowners will have a little bit more confidence in seeking these kind of intervention contractors, investing in dollars, investing in services and value that the contractors are able to provide, and have a better understanding of what that value is, while then contractors are raised to meet that demand. And so it is like it doesn't. It's I'm stepping into my kind of physics training here. It's like quantum entanglement, right? So these two entities are bound together through that kind of value co-creation, and helping each other discover that value is kind of like the focus of our research. It's more useful to think of them like that than to think of them as individual entities.
Can I try to answer that in a
Yep.
like slightly different way? I mean, I guess in the question it says homeowner, but I mean, one thing that we could be doing is you can reshape the demand side to affect the supply side. So, you could have, there's lots of really interesting micro examples of this where, entire communities are working within the community first to figure out the entire community's like upgrade needs, bundling certain homes, timing the retrofits in certain ways, right? And so going there to a business and say, this is the demand we have in this place. These are the like timings of the needs we have in each community, allowing that kind of trust building and education to have amongst homeowners talking to each other, right? So they know they're not getting upsold, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that we need to think about in policy of shaping, shaping that market environment. So people with different business models can come in and serve and have trust and kind of taking the risk perhaps of providing a different type of business model.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I'm also seeing a few more questions here about just like who will pay for all of this. And the way to look at this is that, the value that is unlocked. So if, especially on measurement and verification, if you're a homeowner who's investing a significant amount of money in upgrading your home with a new HVAC system, let's say, right now there is no way for homeowners to know the quality of the system installed. And so the value of who pays for that measurement and verification actually is the question to ask is not who will pay for it, but like what value will a trusted measurement and verification of the installed system, what will that unlock for both the homeowners and contractors? If homeowners knew that the system was installed to a high degree of quality, will that increase their confidence in paying for systems that meet their needs? And will it and does that help contractors provide services to help homeowners meet that needs? And so I think that's what we are learning and hearing from contractors is that the physical ability to do the measurement and verification through things like MeasureQuick is relatively, the pathway to that is relatively easy. Initially, helping elevate that practices could be done through, like I said earlier, programs, but and programs that are funding these installations in people's homes. But as a part of market transformation, having that measurement verification actually will unlock more value for both homeowners and contractors. I know, Allison, I know we might be running out of official time. So, but like I said, I'm always happy to chat HVAC. So,
Abby, I was going to ask, are you looking for any feedback on this, or are you looking to have conversations on this? Like if we have people that own companies in this sector and they want to chat with you, is that something that you're encouraging at this point?
Oh yeah. Like I said, I'm always happy to chat HVAC, and like the recommendations that we're making. Let me go back to this slide. So the recommendations we're making are the ideas that we generated have been built by, in conversations with and being led, I will say honestly, by contractors themselves. So I think as we move towards going from making these policy recommendations to making these policies reality, it would need it would need support from a diversity of businesses and diversities of folks in climate advocates, business owners, people who run brands and utilities, anyone who's willing to champion some of these policy ideas or to maybe test and try some of these in their own context, I'd be always happy to chat. And always welcome feedback too on this work as well.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing we could mention too is before we close out for the day is if you go to the link that I've shared a couple times and the QR code that Abby had shared actually goes to that report page too, there's an opportunity to sign up there. And if you sign up through that page, then you will get updates on this file specifically. And it will kind of put you in our ecosystem as someone that might be interested in this. So if this is something that you do want to follow and you want to receive updates on where we're going with certain policy initiatives, if we're moving anything forward, or if you saw something that you'd like to support and get more involved with, then I would just say go to that report page. And yeah, that's the QR code there. Go to that report page. And if you want to give us your email address, it's nothing, we're not going to inundate you with anything, but it's a great way to just stay involved in this file and follow some of the policy recommendations that we'll be making in the future.
Thanks, folks, for joining us. Enjoy your time with your friends and family.